Speaking of strike and effort, I want to shift gears because the swipe right and the swipe left in Europe with Zelensky has finished for the time being, as he's gone away and shopped around and got a couple more $1 billion worth of stuff for his military. This guy here, Prigozhin, has said that there was some friendly fire incidents that had happened. If you don't know, this guy here is the boss of the Wagner Group, and there was 4 aircraft that were shot down in one day. So there was 2 helicopters, an Su-35 on the bottom left here and an Su-34 on the top left, were all shot down in one day, and it was shot down in this part of the map here. So right in the middle there you can see next to Belarus, so just on the eastern side of Belarus and just on the very northern part of the Ukraine. So in that oblast there, those 4 aircraft were shot down, and Prigozhin came out and he said, here's where they were shot down in this location. And if you look at where the air defenses were positioned, the Russians were actually shooting themselves down. and the Ukrainians came out and went, well, you know, there's 4 aircraft shot down, and they're like, well, hey, bro, was that you? Well, me, man. We don't even have air defenses up there pointing at Belarus up in that part of the, well, they probably do, right? But all these aircraft are shot down. It's all coming through on Telegram, right? You can't see it all. And I've got all the footage, but I can't show it to you here, right? I'm not allowed to show that stuff on YouTube. You're not allowed to show, like, explosions. And, well, the reason in some ways, I kind of agree with it, right? Because as soon as you see a missile hitting something, that's people dying, right? So this helicopter's getting shot down with 5 or 6 people in them. And, you know, these 2 jets, you know, the Su-34's got 2 people in it, no ejections or anything like that. And you're seeing the aircraft get hit with a missile and crash all the way to the ground. And, you know, that's why YouTube doesn't allow you to show you that stuff on the platform. You can show the photos of it, but you're not even, so you get censored, right? They take the monetization off it and say, hey, you can't do that. And there's things that you can do to say, yes, this is sensitive content, but the minute you do that, then you reduce your exposure. So that's the reason why YouTube don't have it on there. But look, you know, the footage is not anything that you wouldn't expect. It's not some overly scary thing. Either it's just a missile hitting a plane and a helicopter, but it's a Russian missile hitting a Russian plane or a helicopter. And I sort of, you know, I wonder what on earth is going on. And the reason I say that, folks, here's the unspoken truth is, when I was in the Royal Australian Navy, I was a combat systems operator. And that's a fancy way of saying I was a radar, sonar, and electronic warfare operator. I didn't spend a lot of time on a sonar set because we simply didn't do that much ASW work. And when we did ASW work, it was more fun not to sit on the sonar, listening to all of the noise and whale farts that are going on there. It's not very exciting. I would rather be maneuvering the warship in a different position, which was way more fun because you're moving assets around. But most of the time, guided missile frigate that I was on and guided missile destroyer that I was on, what your job is to be a missile sponge for an aircraft carrier. So you would sit well in front of an aircraft carrier, 20, 30 miles to the front. And we never had the Aegis warship. We never had the Aegis system on our warship. So Aegis means that somebody is in charge of the surface action group. There's 5 or 6 ships on that group. And the Aegis system allows somebody to be in charge of that. And I could be 100 miles to the rear firing missile off a ship that's, you know, 150 miles to the northeast of me and controlling their fire control systems. So Aegis is an incredible system. We never had that. So it was all a manual type system. Radar spins around, operator like me sitting at a console, making sure the computer track is on top of the radar signal, and then we create these fire control solutions and fire missiles at them. But there's a series of things that you go through to make that happen. The first thing that you go through is a series of things called warnings. So in NATO military, we have warnings. In Ukraine, I'm tipping that they don't have warnings because they know exactly where their air force is and their army and their airborne assets. But if Russian aircraft are coming across the border into Ukraine, we know that they're Russians because we can see with our radars where their tracks are. And the Americans are feeding intelligence to the Ukrainians as well. We've got rivet joint aircraft in the air. We've got AWACS in the air 24 hours a day. We know the disposition of exactly every single Russian asset on the battlefield. We know exactly where their stuff is. And it's just a matter of prioritizing which ones are the most highest value with which weapon systems to actually engage them with. So when the Russian aircraft look like they're going to come across the border, we're getting a heads up. And the weapon systems on the ground are turned on at the last second, so we're not targeted with anti-radiation missiles and plinked off the battlefield. But when you turn those systems on, there's systems that you use called IFF, identify friend from friend, friend from foe. Radar turns around and the return from the aircraft goes, "Oi, I'm on your side." So there's different things that you have from the aircraft side. You have a thing called mode alpha, mode Charlie, and mode 4. So Russians have a similar thing. So mode alpha identifies which aircraft it is. I can look it up and see the side number. This is in Western Air Force, but the Russians have the same thing. Mode Charlie tells me how high the aircraft is because it's reporting to you. And then mode 4 is the crypto. So if the aircraft doesn't have the right crypto loaded into the aircraft itself for that given day, then I need to call it up on the guard channel and go aircraft in vicinity of, 290, 300 miles in from wherever. And that aircraft goes, "Oh, he's talking to me." And yes, that's me. Yes, I'm a friendly. And there's other ways that you go through identifying who they are if they haven't loaded the mode 4 into the aircraft properly. The Russians have all the same IFF stuff. So when the radar gets turned on, I know instantly whether that's a good guy or a bad guy. So I'm scratching my head thinking nobody in mainstream had reported that the Russians were shooting themselves down. It wasn't until this happy character came out and said that they were shooting themselves down that everyone was like, "Oh." And then the Ukrainians are like, "No, it wasn't us." But I don't know. Am I being an instrument and a mouthpiece of deep state here by saying that the Russians are shooting themselves down? Because I think of the whole reason I'm telling you about how the operation works is it's impossible for a Western military to accidentally shoot down 4 aircraft in one day. 1 aircraft, maybe, yeah. 1, yes, I'll give you that mistake could happen. But 4 in the same afternoon? Come on, man. So what's happening there? Is it really the Russians shooting themselves down in that part of the world? Or are the Ukrainians putting their air defenses right up against the border there? Because this activity happened within a 20-mile radius. The 2 helicopters here to the north, the Su-35 and the Su-34, and this is down here further is the border. This is inside of that oblast there in the map here that I showed you. So this is the oblast up in the middle of the screen where it says Belarus. You can't see my mouse because I'm not sharing my screen, but the red border there is where it's happening. So I just wonder, is that really happening, or have the Ukrainians moved up some mobile system? I don't think the Ukrainians have moved up. There's no chance of that happening. So if they have shot themselves down, what on earth is going on? What on earth is going on?
Well, I've got a theory. First of all, so whales fart, huh?
They do.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And you can hear the whales on your sonar as well, surprisingly.
Okay, so I've got a theory. Given the kind of conscripting that they're doing right now in Russia in order to keep their numbers up, that guy manning that missile system, right now, he might have been working at the vodka factory last week.
And see, I kind of went through that in my mind as well. Like maybe but nobody gets to sit at that console, and even if he was drunk, let's play that out for a second. Even if he was drunk, his mate is sitting next to him. He's not drunk. And the guy who's actually turning the key and pressing the button to fire the missile control officer, he would have to be off his face blind drunk as well to make it happen. Like it's not one person sitting there playing a video game like Call of Duty and going, "Fire the SAMs," and there's like a series of things you have to go to. And there's a series of escalations that you go through to make it happen as well. So then play that out with me for a second as well. They're over the border, actually in Russia itself, and the aircraft are flying in Russian airspace. The operators know the capabilities and limitations of the Ukrainians, because your job as the missile operator, as the air defense operator, is to know the capabilities of these aircraft and the enemy. So if you suspect that they're coming at you and they've got weapon systems that can engage you, meaning take out your radars and your complex where you're actually stationed, then you'll have to take appropriate actions to get the hell out of Dodge if they're coming for you. So we know, and the Russians know, that there's Su-24 and MiG-29 that could come at them, and maybe Su-27 as well. But in that part of Ukraine, the northern part of Ukraine, why would they come across the border and attack them there? And then the helicopters, when you see the footage of it, Most of the helicopter activity you see on the battlefield in Ukraine is at about 20 feet. And the reason they're at 20 feet is they're flying nap of the earth, which is pretty normal for helicopters. They're flying nap of the earth, and the reason they're doing that is to use the terrain as cover from the man pads, from the shoulder-fired SAMs. And the fighter jets are doing the same, albeit at probably about 100 feet. They're not quite as low as the helicopters, of course, but the Su-25s are still flying around at 100 feet. And when you see the footage of these helicopters flying around, they're at altitude. They're probably at 2,000 or 3,000 feet. So the Russian missile operator going, oh, look, the Ukrainian Mi-8s are coming at us at 3,000 feet. Let's fire 2 missiles, 1, 2. Like, no. The unspoken truth is that I believe, here's the unspoken truth, here's my hypothesis, that's actually deliberate. They're deliberately targeting themselves.
False flag?
No, discourse within the military.
Okay.
So Prigozhin has come out in the last couple of days, and, once again, I don't know if the Russian blogger, wannabe Prigozhin is truthful or not. It's very hard because, first of all, I don't speak Russian, and I'm relying on translations that you see. But if you put all the pieces together of how cranky he is, last week he was standing in front of about 30 bodies of guys that had just been killed, and then getting upset with the Russian leadership saying, you caused this. I asked you to send ammunition. You didn't send ammunition. We've got no ammo. That's the reason these guys are dead. We've got no artillery. That's the reason these guys are dead. That's on you. And he's screaming and shouting and carrying on about it. Then he was threatening to leave. And then Gerasimov came over and Shoigu came over and said, no, we're going to get you the ammo. And he said, all right, I'll stay. And now I'm going to leave, and now I'm going to stay. And then he said he was going to pull out. And then he said he was going to pull out and withdraw from Bakhmut. And when he was going to withdraw, he said he was going to tell the Ukrainians where their positions were. So now the Ukrainians could go up and take the ground back. So so there's this internal discourse of what's going on and what's happening within the Russian military. And the truth is, there's absolutely no way that friendly fire at that scale could happen within the Western military. I'll give you one accidental shoot down, but how could you shoot down a helicopter at 3,000 feet when you know from as the missile operator, the footage, the tactics, the strategies, that every single helicopter on the battlefield, Russian and Ukrainian, is flying at 20 feet. And now you see aircraft over and above where you are, where your position is, to the north of you at 3,000 feet. How on earth could that be a Ukrainian helicopter? Impossible. And likewise, you see Russian Su-35 and Su-34 fighter and bomber aircraft to the south of where you are, tracking, looks like to the north or directly to the west of where you are at altitude, and you engage them. What would the Ukrainians be doing at altitude there? There's just no way a missile operator would make that mistake. There's no way. So I've got the graphic on the screen there that says Russian friendly fire, but it's deliberate. So why would they be deliberately doing that? Because if a process of elimination from a lonely old combat systems operator like me can disseminate that, and they have these controls and these systems in place and that stops friendly fire from happening, how did it happen 4 times in one afternoon? The only answer to that, the only rational answer to that is it's all deliberate. It's not actually friendly fire. It's deliberate. Something's going on there.
Wouldn't these guys be worried about ending up in a firing squad?
Well, they would be.
Okay, well,
that's the level. That's the level of it, right? You just killed like 10 people and destroyed gazillions of dollars worth of assets. And these assets are being plinked off the battlefield systematically, and you're just doing it for them on their behalf. It's a really strange thing. The unspoken truth is that the people that are reporting on it, not a single person has said what I've said, because not a single reporter from CNN, from BBC, from ABC, from anywhere that's reported on this, any of those 20 or 30 sources that I looked at, is a missile operator. They're not, in the Americans, you call them operator specialists. In Australia, you call them combat systems operators. Not a single one of those has consulted anybody that's ever sat at a missile console or has been a Patriot operator or a Hawk operator, or on a warship, for heaven's sake, which is what we do, is air defense. They haven't asked. And they go, oh, it's Russian friendly fire. But it's not friendly fire. Because friendly fire like that is impossible. That doesn't happen. So there's something else going on there. Mark my words, and we'll see more about that soon.
Well, this could be a fascinating wrinkle that I didn't see coming. I mean, we've always heard the opinions of analysts out there that the Russians are disorganized, that they're all conscripts, they're not true professionals, and they just rely on pure volume of bodies in order to win, and all the rest of it. So I've heard that, but it never really occurred to me that there could be so much dissension in the ranks that they would start essentially turning around and shooting their officers. Now, actually, I have heard those stories of rank and file turning around and shooting the lieutenant because they didn't want to, but this is a whole different. This is a very sophisticated level of, because if you turn around and shoot your lieutenant, you could probably say, "Oh yeah, well he was shot by the enemy." It was but if you launch a missile that you're in charge of,
it's not like crack. Like who was that? I don't know. Like, there's some version of some cover up that could happen there. I'll give you a couple of friendly fire incidents that have happened in the past. Yeah, and so MH17 is the most recent one everyone can think of, right? So MH17 happened over the Donbass, where the Russians